If you're a woman with type 1 diabetes over 30, you've probably been told to cut something, like carbs, calories, certain meals, like the breakfast, whatever. Today I'm going to tell you why every single of those approaches, though, is making your body worse and what you should rather do instead from a type 1 diabetic, coaching women with type 1 diabetes to lose body fat and be healthy long term. So the standard fat loss advice, as I just summed it up briefly, is usually to decrease the input, as in the caloric input, the food that you're consuming, so that you're in a calorie deficit and you're losing weight. For a type 1 body, the game is a bit of a different one because we know that stress decreases your output, as in makes your metabolism adapt to the bottom, makes you burn fewer calories. And if you then decrease the input further, this can lead to more stress, right? Because it's physiological stress to be in a deficit. Now, since with type 1 diabetes, you're in a position, because of the highs, the lows, that you already have more stress, more inflammation in your body than the average person, because every low leads to more cortisol, more adrenaline, leading, right, to physiological stress, which accumulates, and therefore, right, it's like adding on top of the other stresses that you have in life and on top of a calorie deficit, for example. But also a high leads to inflammation and therefore stress in the body. And that's a problem because that stress leads to insulin resistance, leads to you needing more insulin over time, which you will anyways as a type 1 diabetic because your pancreas stops working a couple years after the diagnosis altogether. So these things add up. And the fix obviously will not be to just have more stress by decreasing the calories further or removing certain foods like carbs from the diet altogether, which is also shown to increase stress. So I think my point is clear, and I want to walk you through the 5 levers that will actually matter if you have type 1 diabetes, that will actually make a difference so that you can lose and keep off body fat for a lifetime. Number 1 will be to build muscle to lower the insulin demand. It matters because muscle is the most, let's call it, insulin sensitive tissue in your body, and more muscle means that you need less insulin to do the same job. So it leads to less storage. So you can think of it like this. Every cell that needs sugar needs insulin to get the sugar, as in insulin being a storage hormone that puts the nutrient, the sugar in that case, it also does that with other nutrients, inside the cell. So muscle cells, so to say, are the biggest spenders of sugar because they will use up the most. So the more muscle you have, the more of these, let's call it glucose or sugar spenders you have, the more you will burn. And that's what reduces the demand for insulin, because relatively you will need less insulin to put that sugar into the cells. Okay, practically this means do 2 strength sessions a week minimum. 2 a week is like a good starting point, and from then you can add up depending on where you're at, of course, right? If you're at a point where you have to lose severe weight because you're, for example, at 140, 70-ish kilograms in that area, which would be 300-ish pounds or even more respectively, then doing a lot of strength training will not be the first thing to do, but just generally speaking, right, 2 strength sessions a week will be a very good starting point. Track your weight, add a little weight every session. I also have other podcast episodes and also resources on my social medias where you have get a good starting point of certain programs that you can do. 6 to 8 sessions per program, like you repeating the same workout program. So say you, let's say, do the program 2 times a week, then you repeat it for 3 weeks, and then you switch to the next program, as in you rotate the program. Okay, so that's it. I also built as I said before, a full program on a good starting program for strength training and also intervals. So if you comment on one of my posts on Instagram, the word protocol, I will send this over for free. So that's something you can start with. The lever number 2 will be having a proper protein first breakfast within an hour of waking. And no, this does not mean protein only or protein shake only. It means protein first. So it should have plenty protein. 30 grams is a good ballpark number, but it should also have some carbs, like 10, 15-ish grams of carbs, like an apple in the morning, and also some fat. So that's important to stabilize blood sugar throughout the day. The first meal sets the, sets the entire day's insulin curve or blood sugar curve up, right? So it's the basis for everything that happens then and has the biggest impact on the rest of the day. So The mechanism behind that is that cortisol goes to like a healthy and high level throughout the day. You're not having like these blood sugar or cortisol dips throughout the day where you're being super tired or anything, but making sure that you have enough of the right food in the morning is absolutely crucial. Also, right, fiber in the morning, having some veggies is important, of course, right? Recommending veggies with every meal anyways. So I had several clients that, right, after the first week reported back to me, hey, I actually feel satiated till lunch. I don't have the midday dip anymore. So a lot of times an afternoon dip can come from you not having a proper breakfast. Okay, so this really has like a big impact on the rest of the day and takes a lot of stress from your body, stress that you might have from may have accumulated before from a caloric deficit, from fasting, and these kind of one size fits all things that are often recommended out there. So generally speaking, this is a good approach. Doesn't mean that intermittent fasting, especially like if you inject it here and there, not every single day, doesn't make any sense, right? I really do use it on purpose as well with clients, but generally speaking, with type 1 diabetes, this is what I would recommend. Third one is that you shouldn't be thinking of cardio as a method to earn your carbs. That's not how it works. The whole idea with also what I mentioned in the beginning of this episode is that you don't want to adjust to the bottom, but you want to adjust to the top. Because if you look at what like how a calorie deficit works, you can only reduce your intake so much, right? At some point, you're not eating anything anymore. So the bottom, right? You're hitting the bottom faster than if you would, for example, adjust your output to the top. As in, I think I just put it in like very complicated way, but it's easier to increase your output, to increase your metabolism and how much you're burning than it is to always just eat less and less and less. And it's the less sustainable way. So go ahead and increase your output versus decrease your input. And the way you're doing that is that you're using strength training, as I mentioned before, to build muscle and decrease the output, improve insulin sensitivity, and therefore use up more calories, so to say. And the other thing that's really important is that we're not doing that by just doing more and more cardio. As I said before, with the stress that you're exposed to with type 1 diabetes, just doing more and more cardio leads to you having so much stress. And then it does the complete opposite, leading to more cravings, leading to more insulin resistance, needing more insulin long term. So insulin resistance is not just something that is relevant for people with type 2 diabetes, but it can be a thing with type 1 diabetes as well. Okay, so the spinning, the HIIT, long runs, all of that can do more harm than good if it's too much. Of course, if you love your spinning class once a week, your HIIT class, your Pilates, your runs, I'm all for all of these things. It's just the dosage, right? Don't go run every single day in the morning or something like that, or do daily classes at the gym. So this can long term, just add to this whole stress that I mentioned before that can come from, for example, also you cutting calories too much. So also consider that training is a stressor as well, and especially long cardio sessions can be a stressor. So as I said before, 20-minute intervals are plenty. 30, 40, 45-minute strength training sessions are plenty, especially with type 1 diabetes, to make sure that you need less insulin in the first place, over time, that your factors per carbohydrate unit are decreased, that how much insulin you need to correct a high blood sugar is decreased, your basal insulin is decreased, and that's something, of course, you should figure out with your endo at all times to be safe. But that the insulin you need in the first place to do the same job relatively is decreased, and that's the idea, and that's how you want to approach the training. And you shouldn't how many people without type 1 diabetes would also do it. You shouldn't approach training in a way where you earn your carbs or just do more cardio to burn more fat, but go the other way, right? Increase your output versus decreasing your input. Okay, that's important. Lever number 4 is to, as simple as it sounds, to eat the food. It's important because most women with type 1 diabetes, from my experience, have been chronically undereating without realizing it, right? Because we hear so many times, and that's what I tried back when I was 13. First things I tried were things like keto, fasting, going paleo, very restrictive things. And long term, our bodies are just adapting to it, right? They are decreasing our output, they're decreasing our metabolism, how much calories we're burning. And this makes it super unsustainable to lose and keep off weight, okay? So a calorie deficit, as I said before, it raises your cortisol. It raises your cortisol, and cortisol is shown to increase insulin resistance, meaning you need more insulin to do the same job as I mentioned before. And that's just, right? That's just the opposite of what you want to do. I'll give you some ballpark numbers because, as I said, lever number 4 is about eating the food, right? At least eat two times the amount of protein of your body weight. So if I'm a woman, I weigh 70 kilograms, I want to have 140 grams of protein per day. As a man, tendency is to have even more than that per day, okay? So again, if you're like 70 kilograms, or your goal weight, and you're like, let's say you're obese, you want to go to like a weight of 80 kilograms, and that's like a healthy weight for you, then you want to have 160 grams of protein a day, again, if the goal weight is 80 kilograms. And that's what I experienced with so many clients, right? So many clients that I've worked with were in a position where they were severely undereating, were having like just half the protein that they actually needed. And then by me actually having them eat more while being active, of course, adjusting sleep, they started losing weight because their bodies were less stressed. So even in a phase where we were not even addressing a calorie deficit, they were starting to lose weight, right? As counterintuitive as this may sound. Last lever for today will be sleeping, because sleeping is absolutely crucial. We know that just one night of where you're just sleeping like 4 hours, for example, decreases your insulin sensitivity severely. So for the same foods, your blood sugar will rise faster and more severe, like higher, than it would after some nights of sleeping more, right? So sleeping less just decreases insulin sensitivity, which is the same as increasing insulin resistance. So for a healthy person, for someone with type 1 diabetes especially, because, right, but also for someone with type 2 diabetes, this is absolutely crucial. So as a type 1, you will need less insulin for the same food if you're just sleeping more. So that's absolutely crucial. And what I like to give as like a ballpark number, because it's also about the timing, not just the quantity, sleep before 11 p.m., right? Wind down the last 2 hours of the day so that you can fall asleep quickly. Like imagine going to the gym, you won't be able to fall asleep right after working out, or having meetings till 11 p.m. and then sleeping at 11:15 doesn't work. So as a ballpark number, like 2 hours, last 2 hours of the day, less screens. If you use screens, go with a TV. The screen is is further away from your eyes. So this will help your body like really wind down. And if you like read a book, don't read like a horror or thriller or something like that, because it's of course more stimulating and will lead to more dopamine release in your brain, right? Will make your nervous system more active. And that of course prevents you from falling asleep quicker. So you want to like sleep through the night, fall asleep quicker, which, right, you do by going asleep early, and then make sure last 2 hours you're winding down. Ideally have your dinner 4 hours before you go to bed. So if you sleep by 11 p.m., have your dinner at 7, right? Stop eating after dinner. That would be the way to go. If you wanted to, you could also like take a walk after dinner. Also helps flatten the glucose curve, and that's like a good routine to work with. Okay, so if you just go back and reflect a bit on what we just talked about, what every lever has in common, and you also see like the overlap between these 5 tips I just gave and the 5 levers, it's not about eating less. None of these is about eating less. It's about improving your insulin sensitivity so your body has an easier time needing less insulin in the first place and flattening the glucose curve, right? Which also helps improve your time in range. So these things all come together in the end of the day. And we're not even talking about the technical aspects of when do you inject your bolus yet, when do you take the insulin, how much insulin to take for XYZ carbohydrate. These are like really meta things that will help manage the rest better automatically, okay? So These are absolute baselines and absolutely crucial to make sure that you need less insulin to do the same thing, that you flatten the glucose curve, that you're healthy, that you have an easier time losing weight, just to set up basics so that from a hormonal environment perspective, you have an easier time losing the weight. So implement these 5 steps, go one step at a time, and it will make a big difference. If you're curious about what to eat specifically, you can go ahead and message me the word breakfast on Instagram. I'll send you over my free breakfast guide so that you have a good starting point. You can just follow that. It will lead to you making progress, lose some body fat, have more energy. And when it comes to the training, if you're curious about how to train, you can message me the word protocol, as I said before, so that you know specifically how to approach the intervals that I mentioned in the strength training. Okay, so remember, your body isn't broken. It just needs the right nutrients, needs the right approach with the sleep, with the biorhythm, so you can have energy, you can sleep well, and so on and so forth. And to avoid missing out on future episodes, go up, subscribe to the podcast, and I see you in the next one.